world above the subterranean chamber, the realm Zardari had bought with the complete surrender of his soul, was a landscape of dizzying, unnatural peace. The sun of Islamabad felt sterile and harsh against the cool, ever-present chain that wrapped his essence. He sat in the Prime Minister's chair, a place of power he had never sought directly, but now occupied as a chilling finality. The people, battered by years of political feuding, welcomed his return with a collective, exhausted sigh of relief, mistaking the Jinn's enforced stability for a miraculous calm. The media called it the Great Reconciliation. Nawaz Sharif and Imran Khan's disappearances were officially ruled as a voluntary, mutually agreed-upon hiatus from the national stage. For health and spiritual reflection, a narrative so thin it should have fractured, yet the nation, under the insidious, subtle influence of the Shayatin al-Watan, accepted it with uncharacteristic docility. The Jinn's true work was not just in Zardari's ascension, but in the manipulation of the collective national will, dulling the critical thought and stifling the instinctive dissent that was once Pakistan's defining political rhythm. Zardari's office in the Prime Minister's house was soundproofed, yet never silent. The Jinn, the Shayatin al-Watan, no longer spoke in the scraping voice of the pit. Now it was a constant, intimate whisper in Zardari's mind, a cold current flowing through his thoughts, guiding his hand, his gaze, and his every pronouncement. The infrastructure, my king, focus on the arteries of the land, not for the people's ease, but for my easy passage, the Jinn commanded. Zardari became a man of cold, ruthless efficiency. His first 6 months were marked by a flurry of hyper-focused projects. Vast, silent tunnels drilled beneath key military installations, hidden data centers constructed deep within mountains, and unprecedented investment in an occult energy grid officially branded as a pioneering geothermal power network that connected all of Pakistan's most ancient, forgotten shrines and historical sites. These weren't for national development, they were the Jinn's conduits, establishing a deeper root system for its control. His infamous smile had changed. It was no longer the ghost of a calculated political maneuver. It was the rictus of a man who had sold his internal thermometer. It never warmed, never reached his eyes. He executed policies that were brutally detrimental to the common populace, privatizing essential services, liquidating national assets to fund the Jinn's hidden projects, yet the political opposition, leaderless and subtly mesmerized, could only offer tepid, fragmented protests. Ayesha Sultan, a veteran investigative journalist known for her unyielding pursuit of truth, felt the national sedation like a heavy fog. She had spent a career chronicling the vicious cycles of the three rulers, and the sudden, total absence of two of them was an anomaly that screamed betrayal. She began by studying Zardari's speeches. She noticed the unsettling use of archaic, almost Jinn-like metaphors, references to shadow covenants, the great digestion of the past, and a chilling phrase he repeated often: "Rule is the art of perfect, cold submission." Her investigation led her to the abandoned construction sites of the geothermal network. She found no complex machinery, only massive obsidian pillars sunk deep into the earth, pulsating faintly. In the moonlight, these were not power plants. They were enormous, buried batteries for something non-human. "This isn't governance," she wrote in her secret journal, afraid to commit the thoughts to print. "This is a grand, structural ritual. Zardari is not the president. He is the high priest of the stone altar." Dr. Tariq Hussain, a brilliant, apolitical bureaucrat, was the principal secretary tasked with overseeing the execution of Zardari's key infrastructure projects. His loyalty was to the state, not the politician, and his professional alarms were ringing constantly. He noticed the sheer waste of it all. Billions poured into tunnels and deep earth chambers that had no logical function. His budget proposals were routinely overridden with cryptic, handwritten notes in Zardari's distinctive script, notes that always prioritized the Jinn's projects. One day, while reviewing the structural schematics for a tunnel beneath the salt range, Dr. Hussain saw the design, The tunnels formed an impossibly complex, interlocking geometry. He realized it was not an engineering blueprint, but a monstrous, three-dimensional talisman, a containment spell, or perhaps a summoning sigil. He tried to raise a warning to the Chief Justice, but before he could, his office systems failed. Every file, every communication about the occult grid vanished. The Jinn's reach was not just in the spirit world. It had infiltrated the electronic soul of the government. Faisal Javed, a fierce loyalist and former close aide to Imran Khan, refused to believe his leader, simply walked away. He had seen the fanatical zeal in Khan's eyes, the unshakable will to rule for his idea of a better Pakistan. That man would never abandon the fight. Faisal went underground. He used his old network of loyalists and informants, tracing the very last known movements of Khan and Sheriff. The trail led him to an unremarkable, abandoned warehouse in the industrial outskirts of Rawalpindi, the location of the subterranean chamber's entrance, now sealed with a newly poured slab of concrete too thick to ever break. He was not looking for a political conspiracy. He was looking for a physical prison. What he found instead were traces of a deeper, older horror. An informant, a grizzled old guard who had witnessed the snatching, whispered of a vehicle that arrived and departed without a driver, and a smell that lingered for days, sulfur and ozone. Faisal didn't understand the occult, but he understood the nature of his lost leader. Khan's final, silent message, delivered through a cryptic verse left in a prayer book, spoke of an enemy that was neither man nor state, but the hunger of the land itself. This galvanized Faisal. The fight was no longer political. It was a desperate, shadow war for the soul of the nation. One evening, Zardari, in a rare moment of semi-lucidity, stood before a mirror. The Jinn, seeing this crack in its vessel's composure, intensified its mental presence. You wonder, my king, why I chose you over the fire of the fanatic Khan and the greed of the dynastic Sharif. The Jinn's voice hissed in his mind. Zardari felt a searing pain behind his eyes as the Jinn momentarily allowed him to perceive the full truth. The Jinn was not simply a spirit. It was the embodied resentment, the accumulated trauma, and the cynical despair of centuries of misgovernance in the region. The Shayatin al-Watan. It had existed for millennia, feeding off the failure of successive rulers. Khan's righteous fanaticism would have led to a violent, short-lived, self-consuming chaos, a quick meal. Sharif's dynastic ambition was too dependent on foreign power and personal wealth, making him an unreliable, transient puppet. But you, Asif Zardari, the Jinn purred, its voice sickeningly proud. You understood the transaction. You knew that power is only a means to acquire more power, and you were willing to sacrifice your very self for the act of ruling. You are the perfect vessel. Utterly cynical, utterly adaptable, and possessing the cold ambition to rule on my terms. The Jinn's ultimate plan was revealed. It was not satisfied with a single king. It needed a stable, permanent feeding ground. By establishing a deep, structural network of occult power under Zardari's hyper-efficient, cold-blooded reign, the Shayatin al-Watan sought to fully integrate with the nation's spiritual and physical matrix, effectively becoming the permanent, unseen ruler of Pakistan. The system would be so perfectly corrupted, so deeply entrenched, that no future ruler, no matter how righteous, no matter how powerful, could ever dismantle it. Pakistan would become a nation perpetually ruled by its own collective shadow. Ayesha Sultan, Dr. Tariq Hussain, and Faisal Javed, each operating in isolation, came to a similar, terrible conclusion. Zardari was not the problem. He was the symptom. Faisal, having identified the sealed chamber, decided on a desperate act. He needed to expose the truth, not about the Prime Minister's corruption, but about the true nature of the master behind the veil. Using his old security contacts, he managed to procure a large quantity of military-grade explosives, not to breach the massive concrete seal, but to deliver a message. On a night of a new moon, under the cold gaze of the Jinn's power grid, Faisal detonated a charge against the wall of the abandoned Rawalpindi warehouse. The massive concrete seal held firm, but the explosion ripped through the rest of the structure, shattering windows for miles. In the Prime Minister's house, Zardari was meeting with foreign dignitaries, his smile plastered and distant. When the shockwave of the blast reached him, the Jinn's whisper turned into a volcanic rage. A pinprick, a pathetic act of human defiance, crush him. For the first time since his return, Zardari's hands shook. He looked at the horrified faces of the foreign diplomats, and then, in an act of pure, unadulterated Jinn-influenced malice, he pointed a finger and issued a decree, his voice a cold, alien growl. Terrorism, crushing the remnants of the old regime. Bring me the perpetrator, alive. I want to see the flesh that dared to touch my domain. The shadow war had begun. 3 isolated individuals against a king who was merely the skin suit of an ancient national evil, all while the nation slept, content in its delusion. They knew they could not defeat Zardari, the man. They had to fight the entity that wore his face and was slowly, silently, colonizing the very soul of the land.